La STM vous souhaite la bienvenue à bord.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Metro Anarchy, a Cities Skylines video series which is going to focus primarily on public transportation. My name is Fleek, and I have been a longtime fan of city building games, going back, of course, through the SimCity franchise, and I was thinking about this today, and I think that Railroad Tycoon was actually the first game like this that really captured my attention. Now, recently I've become a big fan of City Skylines, and I'm sure, like many of you, I also have started following a number of YouTube video series based on the game. As I've been playing and watching videos, a couple of things started to jump out at me. First was that lots of players seem to have questions about public transportation. What type to use, where to put stops, how much distance to put between stops, and overall just how to structure it. And second was that most video series tend to focus on how to use road networks to fix traffic problems. Now, I think there are a couple of reasons for that focus, which we'll get into later in the video, but public transportation has always been my favorite aspect of this style of game. And that's when it occurred to me that a series with a specific focus on that side of the game would be a nice addition to the already great mix of videos out there. So before we go on, I want to take a moment to let you know that if you have a city that you think I could use in the series, see the description below for instructions on how to send it to me. As things get started, finding cities to use will be one of the biggest challenges, so please don't hesitate to send me a city. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My contact info is in there as well. Also, I have to give the standard YouTube disclaimer that if you like the video, please do me a huge favor and give it a quick like. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when a new video comes out. So in this intro video, I'm going to be walking through the experiment that I did with one of my cities when I first started thinking about putting this series together. It's a really interesting look at how public transportation can impact traffic. And while that's running, I can give you an idea of what to expect in the series. So when I started thinking about putting this series together, I realized that I didn't actually know exactly what impact public transportation has on a city. Obviously, it reduces the amount of traffic. I just didn't know exactly to what extent. So I decided to run a little experiment and take one of my cities and delete all of the public transportation and see exactly how much of an impact that has. On a quick side note, I decided early on that this first episode was going to have more of the background and my concept behind the series, so it's going to have quite a bit more talking and exposition than gameplay. Future episodes are going to be much more gameplay oriented, so please just bear with me for this first episode. Also, you'll have to bear with all of the ships I have on this map. I'm not exactly sure why there are so many ships on this map. I think I've seen that on previous cities that I've built. If anyone knows why certain maps have way more ships than others, leave a comment below. And if you also know there's a way to slow down the number of ships, that would be awesome to know as well. This is the city of Santa Linda. It's the city that I think we'll use for the first couple of episodes, and was the city that I used for the experiment that we're going to be recreating. Population of just over 83,000. Take a look at the traffic. Traffic is pretty clear, usually fluctuates between 85 and 88%. You can see there are a few hot spots here and there, but for the most part, completely green. In case you're interested, I do play with despawning turned off. I just think it's a little bit more fun and realistic, although you can tell from a map that I don't build all that realistic of a city. I don't put zoning or much of anything along the major thoroughfares. I do put some service buildings here and there, but for traffic control, I mostly keep things off of those main roads. Public transportation system is mostly metros and buses. I think After Dark was the only DLC I had before I stopped playing on this map. So it's limited to the more vanilla public transportation systems. Total users of just over 7,000 residents and just under 3,000 tourists. This is a number that I have seen on a couple of different save games that I've taken a look at on the workshop. In relation to your total population, about that 10 to 15% range. It's something that I'm interested in hearing from you about. Post a comment below and let me know, what is the highest usage of public transportation you've gotten in a city relative to your total population? So now I'm going to go ahead and delete all of the public transportation lines, and then I will give you a few last bits of information while we let that run, and then we'll time-lapse the rest of it before we look at the results and wrap up. I just noticed something funny while I was looking at the video of the section where I was deleting the public transportation lines. If you didn't notice in the background, go back and check out all the frowny faces that pop up every time you delete a public transportation line. Gave me a chuckle. I think it's along the same lines as the enjoyment you get from watching your city get destroyed by comets and tsunamis. So I've zoomed in on the area where I know the most traffic problems are going to develop, so that when the time lapse kicks in, you can see that traffic developing. But before we drop into that, just wanted to give you a few last notes and ideas about the series. First point is that I really want this series to be interactive in nature. While I have a bunch of ideas and thoughts on what I'd like to do, I really want to hear from you about what you would like to see and what questions you have. One of the things that I love about the Cities Skylines community is how creative it is, from the asset creators and map creators to the content producers that put stuff up on YouTube and all of the people that interact with them. That's one of my favorite parts of the game. So please send in feedback, send in questions, send in ideas. Of course, if you have a city, send that in as well, but definitely know that I want you to be involved. Second point I want to make is that while I am extremely passionate about this project and the game, I am not an expert in any way. I would consider myself a quite average player, and I don't have any professional expertise that's applicable to the game in any way. I'm an insurance salesman by trade, so unless they come out with an insurance salesman DLC, I'm probably not going to have much professional experience that is applicable. And that leads to my next point, which is that since I'm a pretty average player, this series is primarily going to be targeted for the beginning to average player. It might get a little bit more complex as we go along, but at the outset we're going to keep it pretty basic. So we'll be focusing primarily on the most basic forms of public transportation. Metros and buses are generally the backbone of most systems. We'll probably use trams and ferries in certain spots where geography requires it. Perhaps trains on some bigger maps, but we're not going to be building giant blimp systems. My deepest apologies to all you blimp lovers out there. And that takes me to my last point, which is that from a mod and asset standpoint, we're going to try to keep things pretty vanilla, although I will use a few of the more common mods like Move It or Fine Road Anarchy. Series is called Metro Anarchy, so I suppose we have to use that one. And I will need to use some custom assets like higher capacity buses and multi-platform metro stations, but we're not going to be building huge elevated metro systems using the Metro Overhaul mod, and I'm not going to be going into the public transportation mods like Transport Lines Manager or Improved Public Transportation. While those are lots of fun, you just really don't need them. If there's a lot of interest, it might be something that we can tackle later in the series. So now we'll drop into the time lapse, and I will be back after my city starts collapsing under the weight of its crushing traffic. So I have to say that this has exceeded even the expectations that I had from the first experiment. So right after the time lapse got cut off. We were at about 42% if you're keeping score at home during the time lapse. Right after that, it dipped down to about 39%. And then I realized that when I got the After Dark DLC, I had put in a pretty extensive bike lane system that ran through this industrial area here up into these residential areas and this residential commercial area. It had branched up here into this industrial and then all the way out to this tourist area, and then even ran down through these beach communities, although there's really no traffic down there. That's one thing that kind of surprised me, is that there's really no traffic problems on the south side. It's really all focused on the north side. But then after I removed those bike lanes, look at where we ended up. We ended up at 28%. So I always knew public transportation played a large role in controlling traffic, but I wasn't quite aware that it had that large of an impact. So I have to say, I am even more excited to do this series now that we've gotten these results. These have far exceeded what I expected out of this experiment. Well, let's jump in and I'll give you a quick tour of the mayhem, and then we'll wrap up this episode, starting down by the airport, then cruising all the way along up here into this tourist area. Then it crosses over into this commercial and residential area. It backs up along the freeway up here as well, but that's relatively minor. All of this traffic in here then connects through this tunnel down into the passenger harbor, where there is just a mess of traffic. I'll go ahead and unpause and see the only cars moving are the ones that are driving through other cars. Everything else is just backed up. So I'm going to end up with a few last cinematics, and we will wrap up this episode, and look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Having successfully destroyed Santa Linda's traffic situation in this episode, in the next episode we are going to fix it. We're going to rebuild the entire metro system in a spoke and wheel style as opposed to the grid that it was originally, and that will allow us to talk about the differences between those two styles, as well as take a look at some actual real-life metro systems for inspiration. As I mentioned before, please leave comments below with your thoughts or ideas for this series, or you can also hit me up on Twitter. What questions do you have about public transportation in City Skylines? What are your most common challenges? How do you usually set up your transportation systems? And what would you like to see in this series going forward? Once again, if you have a city that you think I could feature in an upcoming episode, see the description below for how to send it to me. And until next time, mind the gap.